Freestyle Travel. Hey everybody, this is the Freestyle Travel Show, and I am your host, as always, Kenny Flannery, and this is the last podcast of the year, 2020, and I will be telling you my 2020 hitchhiking statistics, as well as going over the sort of archetypes of people that will pick up a hitchhiker. Who picks up a hitchhiker? And specifically, I'm going to kill two birds with one stone, and I'm going to tell you about my trip hitchhiking from North Carolina to Wyoming, where I am now. North Carolina was where I was at for the last podcast, so I got a bunch of rides that fit into those sort of typical-ish type of people that pick up hitchhikers. So I'll start with the statistics first, and last year is the first year that I kind of kept track of my hitchhiking stats, if you will, in a spreadsheet. Technically, I could go back to 2007 and go through my notes and sort of fill all this in, but it's a lot of data entry. But if you go to hobolifestyle.com, you'll see my 2020 hitchhiking statistics as well as 2019. You could find those too. And basically, I kept track of everything from obviously the amount of rides that I got, the distances traveled, how many days of the year I hitchhiked, the genders of people in the car that picked me up, type of vehicle, how many police interactions I had, even how many times people gave me beer, weed, cash, food, things like that. So I'm going to kind of run through the highlights. And like I said, you can always go to hobolifestyle.com and take a look at those charts and read some of it for yourself. But yeah, it's pretty interesting to see how it all shook out, given the type of year that it's been. So I'll give you some comparisons to 2019 as well. And yeah, we'll bring you on over to Wyoming after that, going through the archetypes of people who pick up hitchhikers. So let's just jump into it. Hope you all are having an awesome time. Let's do this. Alrighty, let's start with the statistics for 2020. So like I said, it's kind of surprising because it's been a strange year. You know, there's a big quarantine sort of vibes back in the springtime, and that's sort of lingered on. And I know I was sort of off the road for a couple months, which is pretty wild for me. And yeah, so first statistic, I was surprised to see that in 2020, I spent a total of 68 days hitchhiking. Those are 68 days in which I tried to hitchhike somewhere. And compared to 2019, it was 68 days. Crazy, right? Exactly the same amount of days. And actually, I'm recording this on December 23rd. And so I kind of jumped the gun on these statistics, but I'm going to be hitchhiking later today. So it'll be at least 69 days of this year that I hitchhiked. More days hitchhiking this year, which is, kind of different. Kind of surprised me just because I was off the road for a couple months. And also last year I was in the U.S., I was in Europe, the Middle East, I was in Africa. It's all over the globe. So I definitely covered more distance, but by hitchhiking same amount of days. And yeah, this year's going to be more after today. So total amount of rides this year that I got was 198, and that is versus 269 last year. So even though I hitchhiked the same amount of days, I hitched like 70 something less rides this year. Kind of different too. I guess I just covered more ground per ride this year. And indeed, I did travel a greater distance this year altogether. So going by miles, because I've been in the United States exclusively this year, I traveled 11,100.86 miles via my thumb versus 10,121.95 last year. So yeah, same amount of days hitchhiking. And kind of close to the same distance covered just by thumb. So I'm not counting any flights that I've had. I drove my sister's car at one point this year. Obviously, that doesn't count in any of this. It's just hitchhiking. There were two times this year where someone got me a bus ticket. So I do count that as miles covered because, stuck out my thumb and somebody hooked it up. So yeah, those are the big statistics. And like I said, just the United States this year, covering all that ground. And one stat that I didn't have last year, that obviously this year is a little different, is 5% of my rides were affected by COVID, the whole coronavirus. thing. And by affected, so 5% is 10 rides, that were affected, and 8 of those were just people that wanted to wear a mask, So I hopped in the car and either they were wearing a mask already or they popped one on, so I popped one on, so that's not a big deal. One dude just asked me to sit in the back seat so we wouldn't be breathing each other's air or something. I don't know. Hopped in the back seat and caught some miles. And the only ride out of those 10 that really mattered was I hopped in a car with this guy in Montana. We start driving, and then he's like, "Oh, we should wear masks," and popped the mask on. And he's like, "Oh, my wife's gonna find out and she would be pissed." And he dropped me off, so I missed out on the rest of that ride because he was paranoid that his wife would find out that he'd given a dude a ride during the pandemic. Oh no. So that's the only ride that like super mattered. And you could definitely argue that there's probably some people who didn't pick me up that maybe normally would have, who were afraid or whatever. And that's okay, because I didn't really notice any difference as far as like wait times, as far as getting out there, getting my rides, getting to where I figured I would get to in a day. Pretty much happened. So maybe I missed some rides, but I don't think it really affected me too much overall. So not too bad. So yeah, a couple more or several more stats, but just a little average stat here in 2020. So my average day of hitchhiking, I would get about 3.3 rides and travel 163.24 miles. That's about 56 miles a ride, which is pretty good. That's on average like an hour in the car with each person, if you think about it like that. So pretty good to cover 163 miles per day. And, there's days where I've traveled very little and days where I traveled a lot. So, for example, my most rides I got in a single day this year was 9 different rides in one day, and that was hitchhiking from North Carolina to New York back in May. And actually the least amount of rides I got in a day was 0. I decided to count that day anyways. A friend had given me a ride from Mississippi to Alabama, so I covered a lot of ground that day, and then he dropped me off right around sunset, and I tried to hitchhike for an hour or so and just didn't get a ride, so I still counted that day. And I woke up the next morning, started catching a bunch of rides, and a few days later that day I caught 9 rides. So there's that. Half the days that I hitchhiked, out of the 68, I caught just 1 or 2 rides. So there's 17 days that I caught 1 ride, 17 days that I caught 2 rides. Which makes sense, because there are some days in there where, so my shortest travel day was just 10 miles. I caught 1 ride cutting across Spokane, Washington. I was just trying to get to the other side of town, so that's a day hitchhiking, technically. And the longest stretch I got in a single day was 1 ride, 837 miles. And that's actually because the dude, he was a middle school science teacher, and he gave me a bus ticket, a Greyhound bus ticket. I told him I was going to Wyoming, and he's like, "Why don't I get you a bus ticket?" I was like, "Well, I was going to stop in Mississippi. That might be closer." And he's like, "All right, well, I'm going to get you a bus ticket to Mississippi then." So, yeah, because of him, I covered 837 miles. And if you don't want to count days where someone bought me a bus ticket, then the longest stretch I got was that same day that I got 9 rides from North Carolina to New York, and that was 598 miles, almost 600 miles, just on rides. So, yeah, and actually there was 3 times where I got a ticket. So there was that one guy, got me that bus ticket, and then later there was a bus ticket, and this is going to be the story I'm telling you here later, because it's part of how I got to Wyoming. A girl, so spoiler alert, a girl bought me a bus ticket from El Paso to Phoenix. And way earlier in the year, a dude gave me a ride to Ogden, and I was going to Salt Lake, so he got me a little train ticket the last 45 minutes or an hour of the way. So that happened 3 times. That was cool. And, okay, yeah, genders. So the way I count the genders of people who pick me up is it's either, so the biggest one was 74%. And that was single males. So like one dude in the car, totally by himself. That was by far the biggest that demographic, whatever you want to call it, that picked me up. And now, sorry, my phone is not showing the stats, so you're going to hear a little buzz here for a second while I pull this back up. But the second was solo females. Here we go. Yeah. Solo female, so that's like a girl, woman by herself entirely. And that was 9.6%. Yeah. Also at 9.6% was a mixed group. So a mixed group is just like, I don't know, a couple, like a guy and a girl in the car pick me up. And then multiple males, so like 2 dudes, that was 4.5%. Or 2 or 3 dudes all in a car picking me up. And multiple females, just like last year, was the least likely to pick me up at 1.5%. So 1.5% of the time when I run up to a car, there'll be like a mother and a daughter or a couple sisters in there. The mixed group is a weird one, and I might do this differently next year, because say a woman picks me up and there's a baby in the back seat, like a baby boy, I count that as a mixed group. And a lot of people just count that as a solo female. But I don't know. I count the babies. Babies' lives matter. So maybe next year I'll have I'll break that out to more, like not counting babies or counting babies in a different way. Something like that. But yeah, just like last year, the majority of my rides come from a guy by himself. I think last year was like 2/3 of the rides, so a little bit less, 66%. I know solo females went up this year as well. But yeah, it's to be expected. Next little stat is a fun one, just people that gave me stuff on the road. The number one thing is food. And that's about 1/3 of the time. 1/3 of the days that I hitchhike, I should say, not 1/3 of the rides. But about 33% of the days that I hitchhike, at least one person who gives me a ride this year has gotten me some food, whether it's a snack or got a steak dinner, do in a Mexican restaurant, let me just chow down, a bunch of stuff this year. I also counted alcohol, which primarily has been beer. That's 15% of the days I hitchhike. At least one person will give me a beer, either while we're driving or as we get out of the car. And then right around 10% each, 10% of the days, someone will smoke me out, give me some weed in some way or another, be smoking a joint. And 10% of the time, someone will give me cash, whether it's like, here's $5. I think someone gave me gave me $100 earlier this year. Actually, where I'm going to go hitchhike today. I'm just in Wyoming. I'm hitchhiking to Teton Village to see my sister. She works up there. And someone on the way there last year gave me $100. Maybe it'll happen again today. I don't know. It's pretty wild. And yeah, I'm not like into panhandling or anything. I've never done that. I do get mistaken for a panhandler, even though, panhandlers stay on the off-ramp. I'm on the on-ramp, which is a little poetic, literal and poetic. But yeah, people just hand me money anyways, and, it gets pretty awkward trying to turn them down. So I just accept it and use it for beer or maybe a hotel room or food or whatever. So yeah, and all those numbers are actually probably higher than what I just said, because I don't know, there's 198 rides, and sometimes I forget to jot down all the stuff until days later, so I don't always remember that someone, I don't know, gave me some food while I was in their car, or they tossed me like $6 as I was leaving, or I forgot that we smoked a joint or something. So all those numbers are probably a little higher than what I just said. That's okay. Same thing with vehicles. So vehicles have picked me up. This is the next stat, and this is another one that I probably underreport. So the vehicles I keep track of are pickup trucks, because there's usually a lot more, and that was like 16% of my rides. Trucks, like 18-wheelers, that's about 6%. Vans, also about 6%. Police, 3%. And then I just have a big chunk as the other 2/3, because I don't know, maybe next year I'll keep track of like convertibles, SUVs, sports cars. But so far I just kept track of those other ones. So police, that one might stand out to you. 3%. 3% was 6 rides. So I got 6 rides from police this year. And that's after 13 interactions with police. So yeah, 13 interactions with police in 2020. And an interaction is anything from them like shouting at me out the window, like to most of the time actually like stopping, checking my ID. Hitchhiking's not really illegal anywhere. Maybe in small little pockets, maybe little towns made it illegal, but generally not. The one thing I do that is technically illegal sometimes is walk on the interstate, and that varies state to state whether that's legal or not, but sometimes I just got to do it. That's usually why the cops stop. Once in a while they stop for no real good reason, or I don't know. There's this one time this year, one of those 6 rides, this guy in Decorah, Iowa stopped me, and he said that someone called 911, and he's like, they shouldn't. You're just walking. You're totally fine. Where are you going? I'm like, I'm going to this brewery. I just left Minneapolis today. And he's like, it's not far. I'll give you a ride. He's like, they got a new release today? I'm like, no, do they? He's like, yeah, I figured that's why you were going. I'm like, no, it's a legendary brewery. Toppling Goliath. I've just been hearing about it. So he dropped me off right at the door. It was cool. One of the bartenders came, she's like, "Did you just get dropped off by a cop?" I'm like, yeah. She's like, awesome. I'm like, yeah. That's how I roll. Yeah, so one more stat, which is where I slept. And this one I should probably do for the whole year, even on non-hitchhiking days. I've thought about that. But it's basically where I slept. So of the 68 days that I hitchhiked this year, I just kept track of where I wound up sleeping that night, whether or not it really had to do with the hitchhiking or not. So the number one place that I slept after a day of hitchhiking was camping. And that is 43% of the time I ended up camping. Second place would be 31% of the time I stayed with friends, followed by family at 9.1%, and then everything gets like pretty small at this point. 7% of the time I was in a hotel somehow or another. 3% of the time, whoever was driving me, hitchhiking, invited me to stay with them. 1.5% of this year, which I think was just twice, 2 times, people I just like met on or maybe just once, people I just met otherwise invited me to stay. So actually it was just one time. This 1.5% is just one time, I think, or maybe it's twice. The one time I remember is I was with Nick hitchhiking, filming that hopping show, and we met someone at a Cyderobin, and they invited us to come stay the night. So, and then there's a night staying with someone off of Trust Routes, and I think, one night I slept in an airport in San Francisco. That happened. So, yeah, those are my stats. Just ran through them, pretty much all of it, but you can still look at it on hobolifestyle.com if you feel like doing that. Go for it. It's just kind of a nerdy thing for me to do, so I like it. It's fun, but now let me get into the types of people who pick up hitchhikers while simultaneously telling you the story of how I got to Wyoming, which is where I'm at now. So I spent Thanksgiving, if you listen to the last podcast, I spent Thanksgiving in North Carolina on the coast with my brother and sister-in-law, and had a good time. And at that point I decided, I'm going to come out and see my mom and sister out here in Wyoming. Sister lives in Jackson, my mom lives in Alpine, pretty close to each other. And I'm like, all right, so I got a few weeks to get out there. Let's get it moving. So my brother dropped me off down in Wilmington, and this introduces us to the very first type of person who picks up hitchhikers, which is the sort of reflexive do-gooder / religious do-gooder in this case. So this was the teacher, I think I mentioned earlier, who got me a Greyhound bus ticket, and it was immediate. It wasn't like a lot of feeling each other out, or I wasn't riding for like 30 minutes, and then no, I was in the car, and like 2 sentences in, he was offering to get me that bus ticket. And I've encountered this kind of person a lot. Not always like a bus ticket, but there's a girl who picked me up in Flagstaff, and like as soon as I got in the car, she's like, "I have a place for you to stay if you need it." And with the bus ticket thing too, there's been that, just like as soon as I get in the car, like it's like they picked me up to tell me that they've got a bus ticket or a place to stay or something. Reflexive do-gooder. So that was awesome. I was just like, all right, cool. So we went back to his classroom, and he booked the ticket and then drove me into Wilmington downtown and dropped me off at the bus station. And he was also the only person who came close to falling into that like religious, maybe there's one other person actually. Yeah, no, it was pretty much him. But like religious preachers, I'd call them. And this falls into like philosophical preachers too. People who just talk your ear off. This guy was kind of okay, but just like really getting into the whole Jesus thing. And sometimes people be getting into whatever, just light, the spirit of light. But they're just kind of not really letting you get a word in edgewise, and they feel like this is their chance to convert you or tell you what their philosophy or religion is. And maybe at the end they make some kind of move like, oh, do you want to swear into Jesus? That's happened to me a few times. Or, like they've done their whole sales pitch without letting you get a word in, and then maybe they try to like see if you want in. So he was kind of like that, but he was way more chill. I've had people who are just like extreme. I've been taken into churches before, and I had to swear into Jesus once in Australia. That's a whole story. That's a long one. I'll save that one for another time. But, oh man, I got a place to stay out of it, and it's a bizarre night. So, anyways, I got on that bus, and I rode it all the way to Biloxi, Mississippi, and saw my friend there. And, yeah, I'll mention him, too, because actually my friend there, I've known him for 5 years, and he picked me up hitchhiking, and he kind of fell in the category of, did we just become best friends? I love these rides. You get in, and it's instantly like, you're friends already. It's almost like you were waiting on the road for them to pick you up. Like, when's Christian gonna get here? Like, and then he picks you up, and you're like, all right, sweet. It's like you've known each other, and you're just friends already. Like, and in his case, he invited me to come stay with his wife and kids, and I spent a week, and we just became even better friends. And I've been seeing him a whole bunch of times over the years. So, yeah, it was great. I just caught up with him for a few days, and actually, type of dude he is, he actually paid for me to go to the dentist, which was an hour away or so towards Slidell. So caught a ride over there, and I hadn't been to a dentist in a long time. And so that was cool. I got to sit down and figure out what was going on in there, and got a couple cavities filled, found out about a couple other problems that I'll have to fix down the road. Nothing super pressing. Well, no, sometimes it hurts, but right now I'm good. So, yeah, and then him and another friend dropped me off in Slidell. After that, I still had some daylight left, and at that point, my next destination was Houston on the way to Wyoming. Had a friend in Houston I want to see, so I got a quick ride there. And this, I'm not sure what to call this type of person. It's a type of person who thinks they get it, but they don't get it. Yeah. So this girl picked me up, had like hiked the Pacific Crest Trail, so she had like hitchhiked, like trail style. Like she hadn't been on any hitchhiking missions. So sometimes people, they think they totally understand hitchhiking because they've done like trail hitchhiking, where you're just hitchhiking from the trail in a town. You're not really going on a long chaining rides together, getting somewhere. So like she thought she was helpful, but not. And then her mom was following along, and her mom like kind of talked her into dropping me off, but it was like a total like she could have just explained it better. She's like, we can't be late for dinner. And so when they stopped for gas, they dropped me off, and they were going like much further. And I'm like, you can just explain to her that's not going to make any difference. You're going to get off the exit for me like 100 miles later, and I'm just going to jump out of the car while it's still running at a light. This is not going to slow you down for dinner one iota. And I don't know, she like didn't know how to talk to her own mom. And her mom was just confused. It was bizarre. So I ended up kind of screwing me a little bit more, not just missing the miles, because when she dropped me off, it was dark, and had she driven me the extra 100 miles, I would have gotten past this storm. But instead I was stuck in the storm, so I just got rained on all night, wishing I had gotten that little extra distance to and through the next city, and but I didn't. So gets it, but doesn't get it. So anyways, I woke up the next day kind of wet, and I got a ride from what I kind of call the casual foreigner. It's kind of a U.S. unique ride. In the U.S., a lot of people will pick me up. I don't know. They're like, oh, it's the first time I ever picked up a hitchhiker. Or, it's been so long since I picked up a hitchhiker. I didn't think anyone hitched since the 70s or something. But this guy was from Jordan, and this will happen a lot when, like, I don't know, even a Mexican dude picks me up, but certainly a European or they just pick you up. It's just casual. You just hop in and there's just par for the course. Not a lot of curiosity on their part. They're just doing what they're doing. It's like stopping at a red light. Casual foreigner. So it was a short ride. He was kind of a cool dude. The next ride I got fell into the category of motherly. So this was a 79-year-old woman, and she was also like in that category of wacky. She had kind of like bleach blonde hair, 79 years old. Her husband died a year earlier. They were married for 50 years, and she had some grandkids and stuff. Basically just treated me like a son. Took me to McDonald's and made sure I had food in me. She forced two $20 bills on me and just like drove a little out of her way to get me to a good spot. And it was just like super sweet and a little bit wacky, just kind of fun, just like shouting and laughing and having a good time. And that was pretty cool. Next ride I got, I call these guys like territorial hustlers. Maybe there's a better name for it, but these are the kind of guys that sort of for a living, they're traveling within a certain territory. So in this guy's case, he goes to auto auctions, buys cars, and flips them, but he'll drive like 200-300 miles in order to get it. More than that sometimes, like 1,000 miles. But basically a guy who spends a lot of time on the road, and they're essentially working, and kind of that truck driver vibe, but like they know the road, and they're out there hustling. You know, that's the kind of guy who sees something on the side of the road and he's always looking like, oh, what is that? Is that a chair? Can I sell that? One of those kind of guys. Next ride that I got, and this is getting closer to I think Lake Charles at this point. Yeah, no, not quite. Almost to Lake Charles, Louisiana. Bum sympathizer. And that's someone who picks you up and just assumes that you're a bum. You know, just a total bum. So like she immediately picked me up, and she was almost like that reflexive do-gooder, but she wanted to take me to the shelter. She's like, I know a great shelter. It's awesome. I stayed there, and you'll have a good time there. They'll treat you well, and they got nice toothpaste and stuff. I'm like, okay. I'm like, I'm good. I'm like, I'm getting to Houston. Like, I'm out here hitchhiking, but still plenty of daylight left. I'm good. But she, just talked to me like I was a bum, like she was a bum, and that's okay. I mean, I guess there's some overlap, you know, but not enough. And I've stayed in a shelter one night of my life. Been on the road for 13 plus years, and one night I kind of got forced to stay in a shelter. It was freezing cold. A cop had picked me up and basically just dropped me off there and walked me in. I had no choice, and I didn't really enjoy it. And if I never do it again, I'll be cool with that. I'm sure there's ones that are better than others, obviously, but I didn't really dig it. So, bum sympathizer. So the next ride, casual therapy session. So this is the dude who got me to Lake Charles. And yeah, casual therapy session. This kind of blends into a lot of rides, but for whatever reason, well, I think the reason is that they assume they'll never see me again, but people just start telling me things, you know, how they cheated on their girlfriend or their boyfriend, or I had one guy tell me that he murdered somebody. In this guy's case, nowhere nearly as extreme. His was just a lot of how he like cheated on some people and how he was feeling about it, and he was on his way to see some girl. And sometimes you can tell people are telling you something they haven't told anyone else before, not even friends, you know. They already got their dynamics with certain friends, and as a stranger, that's their chance to create a whole new dynamic and get some stuff off their chest that they haven't been able to yet. And I'm happy to listen. I'm on the road. I could use some stories, so have at it. So, casual therapy session to Lake Charles. So that guy dropped me off. It was starting to get a little bit late, and that's when I got the incompatible coworkers. So these are usually like construction kind of guys, or you know, working dudes, and big pickup truck. And in this case, these two dudes, they were just getting along because they worked together, and there's no other way or facet of life where these two would ever hang out. But they're just like holding on to this thread, just trying to get along. So yeah, dude in the back was kind of clearly like a partier, and the dude in the front was more like this is my job, I take this really seriously, and kind of a nerd too. Kind of like what's that guy from The Office, Dwight? He was kind of like that kind of vibe. but more machismo, I guess, like fake machismo. And the other dude was just like a little more chill. So that ride actually worked out pretty well, though. We got stuck in like hellacious traffic for 2 hours, and they were only going to go to Beaumont, I think, or not even Beaumont. Yeah, just before Beaumont. So it looked like I wasn't going to get to Houston. So anyways, we drove to the dude's house, and the other dude was going to drive me into Beaumont. And instead, we got into the other dude's car, the one who'd been in the back seat, and switched to his truck. And as soon as we got in the truck, he's like, "Hey, man, you want to go to Houston?" I'm like, "Yeah, that's where I'm trying to get to." He's like, "I'm going to take you to Houston." He's like, "I didn't want to tell that dude, but I'm going to go up to a College Station and party with a bunch of friends at this like Santa Claus Village." And I just didn't want to let him know that. So I was like, we'll be going through Houston. So you're good. You're getting to Houston tonight. I'm like, hell yeah, man. Oh, I was so stoked. I'd already like texted my friend, like, I'm not going to get there for a day. And I had to text him back, be like, I'm getting there. So he dropped me off right at his house too. It was awesome. So I rode with that guy for another couple hours, whatever it was. Dropped off in Houston and good to go. So spent a few nights in Houston, and I'm going to take a sip of coffee here. It's about to be like, I feel like I'm talking a lot, but it's not like y'all can talk back to me. Hold on a sec. All right. So halfway to Wyoming, basically. Houston. Yeah, there's this dude I met on couch surfing. I'd met him a couple years earlier, something like that. And yeah, he's big into beer, so obviously we spent a few days drinking a bunch of good beer, running around Houston. And my next step was going to be Austin, Texas, just because Austin's cool, and I knew I probably had some friends kicking around there, and I just enjoy spending a day or two in Austin when I can. So, buddy dropped me off pretty early in the morning at the outskirts of Houston, and then I got one of the most common rides that I get. I call it just like the blue collar short ride. This was just a dude working construction somewhere, and hopped in the car, probably less than a 20-minute ride or something. Just a dude on his way to the construction site. I get a lot of those kind of rides, just like hop in, going this way. Pretty common kind of ride. The second and only other ride I got that day, which got me to Austin, is the New Chapter ride. I kind of like these rides. And in this case, it was a 50-year-old woman, and her youngest kid had just turned 18, and she was starting a new chapter of her life. She'd been in jail like a hellacious amount of times. I think she said 54 or something like that. Bunch of times in jail, and just a crazy past. And she was telling me all this stuff. She'd had drug issues in the past, and different dudes, and abusive relationships. And the kids, I guess, were all turning out really well. But finally, she had the empty nest, and she was just super stoked. She was about to get an RV, I think not later that day, but later that week for sure, and just go on a big trip. She'd never been to New York before, and she's just gonna start a new chapter of her life. So I love those rides because I get excited to see that, and then they hear my story and they get excited. We just kind of bounce off of each other and have a great time. So she actually, we went up to Templeton, which is not the direct way to Austin, and got some chili dogs somewhere. I think it was like a random shelter she just knew of or used to work at. And then she drove me straight down to Austin, kind of went out of her way, right down to a 6th Street, which is their, Bourbon Street or whatever, happening place in Austin. So caught some beers, and I got in touch with a friend I haven't seen since middle school, high school, and caught up with him for dinner, and he invited me to come sleep on the couch for the night. So that was cool, just like catching up with him more and sharing stories and where we've been since high school, pretty much, who we bumped into. Y'all have probably had that conversation 100 times too. But yeah, for each person, it's pretty cool. Enjoyed that. Kind of a lazy morning. And then I was like, I'm in Austin. Damn it, I got to get some brisket. So I said goodbye to him, and I was going to go to Canyon Lake next. I have a friend there, which is about an hour away, still west. So went and got some badass brisket. I forget the name of the place, or else I'll give them a shout out. Maybe it'll come to me. It's on the way out of town, though. And yeah, started that day. even though I was only going an hour, some like junctions and stuff. So I got another like blue collar kind of ride, short little way. And then I got a van life ride. Everyone knows van life. It's just a dude living in his van, cruising around. And yeah, he was kind of living around Texas, but living out of his van, and kind of knew the deal and had hitchhiked a little bit himself. So he drove me maybe like 7-8 miles out of his way, which doesn't sound like much, but on a road like that where there's plenty of businesses and stuff, and I don't know, I would have been walking for 2 hours basically. And he just cut out that 2 hours by only adding like 5 or 10 minutes to his day. So that was pretty cool. Next was the I know how it is kind of ride. And these are the kind of guys that pick me up and they're like, I know how it is. I hitchhiked once, or I know how it is. My car broke down and I walked for 10 miles. No one picked me up. One of those kind of guys, middle-aged, gotten a lot of those rides, and those dudes are usually pretty cool because they know how it is. Sometimes they don't actually know how it is, but they know a little bit about how it is. They definitely are just like not into walking and have been stuck before and want to help you out. This dude went out of his way, got me a little further, went to a gas station, told me to pick out whatever beer I wanted. So I walked through town, drank that beer, getting closer and closer to see my friend there in Canyon Lake. I had a note here, but yeah. Oh, okay, nah, that's not important. The next ride I got was obligated and apologetic. So, in this case, this was a woman. She was like cleaning rooms for a living, but sometimes I get the vibe people pick me up and it's like they didn't want to pick me up, but almost like the reflexive kind of people. I don't know. They just like. They stop because they feel like they have to, like, and a lot of times this is someone foreign, like, or it's just like built into their culture. Like you pick up a hitchhiker and they just feel obligated to. And it doesn't necessarily mean they feel bad, but they're just like, they just had to do it. And apologetic though, like, because then at the same time she's like, I'm sorry I can't take you all the way to where you're going. And I'm like, don't worry, you're getting me to the next junction. And they're like, oh, if I had more time I definitely would. And I'm like, don't worry, it's cool. So got that ride, and then the last ride I got out of the day was the out of jail ride. And I've gotten a lot of these rides, dudes who just got out of jail, whether that day or within the last year, and a lot of them just have this really cool spirit to them. Like, this guy had been in jail for 29 years. I'm pretty sure that's the longest of all the people who've given me a ride who've been to jail before. I've had some ones who did like 15 years, but yeah, 29 years. So it was a short ride. I would have loved for it to be longer just to pick his brain a little more, but 29 years. And just a real spirit for life, just like looking at every leaf on every tree as we cruise by, just enjoying himself, happy, ear to ear grin that probably hadn't gone away since he got out. So yeah, he dropped me off at a little tavern and got a beer or two while I waited for my friend to come pick me up because she was just right down the road at that point. And spent a couple nights there with her in Canyon Lake. Pretty beautiful spot. I'm gonna get a video up actually of this whole trip pretty soon. Y'all can check it out. And yeah, one of the last legs of the trip, Canyon Lake to Phoenix. So this was going to be about 1,000 miles, one of the longer stretches of the journey. And nowhere in between that I intended to stop. I mean, if you ever been on that stretch, it's West Texas, man. It sucks. It's just a lot of nothing. And the only real big cities between there and Phoenix are El Paso and Tucson. And I used to have some friends in Tucson, and I got one there now, but I think she's kind of low-key, and not sure who's in El Paso anymore. But my point is, I was just going to go straight to Phoenix, so it was going to be a long stretch. So my friend, she gave me a ride to the I-10, the highway, and the first 2 rides I got were both what I call 20 questions kind of people. So these are usually, there's 2 different versions. So the 2 versions, so I got 2 rides, same kind of dude, back to back. So these 20 questions people, there's the ambitious edition, and then there's the vicarious edition. Both of these guys were like the ambitious kind. So usually these are dudes in their teens, 20s, 30s, maybe 40s, and once they just want to know everything about me, like how I got on the road, what I'm doing, where I sleep, what I eat, how I make money, like how do you do this? Like maybe some of you guys listening right here who haven't traveled or that type, like, and they just want to know everything, and I'm happy to tell them. I have a freaking podcast about this thing. Obviously, I don't mind talking. So back to back, there is another version of that which they didn't really qualify for, which is the vicarious. And usually this is someone older, but sometimes it's someone my age who's just like more established or whatever. And basically they're asking a lot of the same questions, but they have no intention of actually traveling themselves. They just are vicariously living through me, like, oh, what's it like, and where are the best girls, and this and that. Whereas the ambitious types, they're like building up a tool set so they can go out and do it. So same types of questions and things, but just different motivation. But yeah, those rides are fun. It's, easy conversation. It's an easy thing to talk about. So the next ride I got was the quiet long distancer. So this guy picked me up and he's like, I'm going to El Paso, which is 500 miles away at this point. So I'm like, holy crap, this, it's going to be dark by the time I get there. This is a long ass ride. Hell yeah. Need a sip of coffee. Whew. All right. Meeting up with my sister later. Coffee's gonna turn to beer. Good times. Anywho, yeah, but yeah, so dude's like, I'm going all the way to El Paso, and then he's just quiet, I try to start something up, like, because he was driving a van, he's transporting stuff, so I'm like, how long you been doing this? One word answers, basically. Basically, dude just had no interest in talking. We even stopped at one point, and he really wanted like something really good to eat, and being that we were in that stretch of Texas, like literally it was like, well, the next restaurant's in 100 miles. But we went and got some stuff, and yeah, he didn't ask any questions about me, and every question that I asked about him, he gave a one-word answer, and I was like, all right, well, dude kind of falls in that category of obligated to pick someone up too, but just going a real long ways and just kind of content to sit in quiet or music, or he would take some phone calls and no interest in sharing his story or learning mine. But yeah, whatever, that's okay. So like I said, he got me all the way to El Paso. I found a place to camp in the desert. It was about 40 degrees or maybe in the high 30s. Pretty cold, but got through that, and really hoping I would get to Phoenix that day. I got down to the road. It was real busy. I was on the east side of El Paso, so the wrong side as far as still having all of El Paso to get through. So I got another blue collar ride to start the day. Guy on his way to work, he got me a cup of coffee at McDonald's. That was cool. We'll make McMuffin. And yeah, then my second ride was another reflexive do-gooder. Literally hopped in the car, and this girl was just like, I don't know where she was going, but nowhere, basically. And so she's like, oh, I might be able to drive you to Las Cruces, which is like another town over, which would have been awesome. And then as we started getting to downtown El Paso, she's like, would you mind if I just got you a bus ticket? I'm like, you don't have to do that. And she's like, I'd just rather get you a bus ticket than drive all the way to Las Cruces. I'm like, you don't have to do either, really. Like, you're the one who picked me up. She's like, all right, I'm gonna get you a bus ticket then. So we went to the Greyhound station and walked in, and she got the next bus ticket going to Phoenix, and there you go. Have fun and goodbye. Reflexive do-gooder. So I hung around El Paso for a few hours till the bus took off, got to Phoenix late at night. My good buddy Larry picked me up, and yeah, spent several days with him. I had another friend in town and did like a day trip to California with him, and that same friend, when I told him I was going up to Vegas. Oh, I should mention, at this point, somewhere around Texas, it came up that there was a plane ticket, Allegiant, for $38 from Las Vegas to Idaho Falls. And Idaho Falls is one of the closest airports to where my mom lives. And moms being moms, and it being like Christmas, and mostly because it was cold as hell up here, she's like, ticket's only $38. Let me get you that plane ticket, and that'll save you hitchhiking through the cold. So I was like, all right, deal. So I was still going to have to hitchhike from Idaho, from the airport to here. Her arm's all screwed up, and it's still 100 miles away. But I'll get to that. But I was like, sweet. So anyways, now my destination is Vegas. And when I told my buddy in Phoenix, the one I went on the day trip with, that I was going to go to Vegas, he's like, hell, I want to go to Vegas. So he gave me a ride up there. So I didn't even have to hitchhike that stretch. That was really cool. Just went to Able Baker. Those of y'all who know the hopping backpacking beer adventure show I did with Nick last year we filmed. If you don't, you can go to youtube.com/hopping. We have an 8-episode first season all about hitchhiking to breweries. And the very first episode we filmed in Vegas, kind of this time last year, Able Baker Brewery. And I was like, hell yeah, I hadn't been back there since. So we went there. Delicious beers. So damn good. Oh man. My favorite beer that I had there last year, they had 2 different vintages of it this year. Oh man, I was blown away. So stoked. Yeah, just had a great night in Vegas, as always, and got a free room in Paris. I guess I still get those free rooms, which is amazing because I haven't gambled in ages. So that was really cool, and somehow woke up in time for the early-ass flight, and my buddy dropped me off at the airport, flew on up there, and I was in Idaho Falls by like 10 a.m., give or take, with about 100 miles from me to Alpine, where my mom lives. So first ride I got was another one of those new chapter kind of guys. So that dude had just lost a loved one. His girlfriend passed away, and he was living in Chicago and just sort of said screw it and decided just to move to small town Idaho. So when he picked me up, he was actually only just going 1 mile in my direction, and he ended up driving me like 20 or 30 miles. It got me well on my way outside of the city. That was the big thing. I was like, once I get past Idaho Falls, which would have been like 2-3 hours of walking or just that one kick-ass ride, I knew I'd be good to go. So then I got like what I call the small town standard ride, real short ride. It was like 5, 6, 7 miles from this one guy, but he got me to the next junction, and just the small town people. This is the kind of ride you'd get if you were hitchhiking around like the Appalachian Trail or the PCT. It's just people who are, small town, mountain town, that kind of thing, and they're just kind of used to seeing hitchhikers, and not a very long ride usually, but it's usually insanely helpful. Some of the best rides I ever get are like 6, 7, 15 miles. Just those are the rides that save you a ton of walking and kind of get you to the next junction or a busier spot. Yeah, and then I got the last ride of the 26 rides that I've just been talking about. 26 rides from North Carolina to here we've just gone through. And that's the when in Rome kind of guy. So this was a guy who was on vacation and just when in Rome, when you're in a beautiful spot, like, because mountain towns, it's just how it is. It just feels like you should pick up hitchhikers for whatever reason. When it's beautiful, you're just like, there's outdoor activities and stuff like rivers and skiing. Like, there's just more hitchhikers, and he's just like, yeah, scooped me up and drove me the rest of the way to Alpine. The dude was from New Zealand originally, living in upstate New York, has a job that he can do on his computer, sort of like a marketing multimedia kind of gig, and he's there with his girlfriend he was about to marry. He was going to marry her here. They might be married now. I think they got married yesterday or something. So super cool. Dropped me off right at the edge where my mom lives, a 2-minute walk from where my mom lives, and that's it. Came and saw my mom, and I'm here for Christmas. That was just a few days ago. So, yeah, those are not all the types of people that pick up hitchhikers, but that is a good chunk of them. So, and that's my trip. That's how I got here. Those are my stats. Woo! All right, I'm going to take another sip of coffee, and we'll get into this outro here and move onward. Here we go. All right, 2020. What a great year. I mean, didn't get to leave the country. I know hear a lot of people saying like, I'm so glad 2020 is going to be over, and pretty decent year for me. I mean, besides being stuck back in spring and not being able to leave the country, a lot of good stuff has happened. It's worked out pretty decent. And yeah, I'm excited for next year too. I'm excited for every year. But be riding this one out here. I think I'm gonna stay here through New Year's, definitely through Christmas, which is just in a couple days. Mailed in my passport about a month ago, waiting for that to get renewed, so I can't leave the country till that comes back. Anyways, get my driver's license renewed. I'm just taking care of all kinds of stuff like that. And yeah, excited to be here. And I'll have to update those hitchhiking statistics, like I said. So I'll definitely be hitching today and maybe another time or two before the new year is here. So that's it, you guys. One thing to look out for is that whole story I told you. I mean, if you're still listening now, then obviously enjoyed it. And I filmed the whole thing. So that's going to end up being about a 20-minute YouTube video. I got a rough cut of it already. And youtube.com/hobolifestyle. That will be up before the new year, I'm sure. Just whenever I get time. Probably not in the next few days because I'm going to be, catching up with my sister and Christmas is going to happen, all that stuff. But yeah, watch out for that video. A lot of good footage, and this story will come to life a little bit more. So I think that's about all I have to say to all you fine people out there. I hope your 2020 was decent too. Don't let anyone tell you otherwise. And 2021 is going to kick ass. Every year is going to kick ass. Let's be honest. Let the good times roll. All right, you guys. Happy days, happy travels, and I will see you down the road. I need a new escape. With all my shit straight, I'll get my big brain.